3 times in the wilderness, I trusted something meant to save me. A voice calling for help. A tracking device. A badge on a stranger's chest. Each one led me further from safety, not closer to it. And these weren't accidents, because someone wanted me lost. My name is Jason Cole. I'm a physical therapist from Boise, Idaho. I've hiked alone for 6 years, and I know how to read a trail. Last October, I drove 2 hours to the Sawtooth Wilderness for a loop I had already done twice before. I set up camp near the trailhead at sunrise, staked my tent down, and left my gear inside before heading out for an afternoon loop. No other cars in the lot, which was normal for a weekday. By noon, I was deep in the trees, in that kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat. Then I heard it, a woman's voice and screaming. It came from somewhere below the trail, past the tree line, down a slope thick with brush. I froze. The scream came again, shorter this time, cut off in the middle like something had stopped it. I called out, "Hello? Are you okay?" Nothing. Then weaker, a voice answered, "Help me, please, my leg." I left the trail. I told myself I had no choice. You do not walk away from a voice like that. I pushed through the brush, branches tearing at my jacket, and found her 20 feet down the slope, sitting against a rock, one leg twisted underneath her. Her pants were torn at the knee. Dried blood ran down to her boot. She looked up. Relief flooded her face. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't think anyone would come." "I'm Claire," she told me. "I was hiking with my sister. We got separated near the ridge." I fell, chasing her voice. "I've been out here since yesterday." Yesterday. That word snagged on something in my mind, though I couldn't say why at first. Her clothes were dry. Her hair was clean. A person who spent a night exposed on a mountain does not look like that. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself fear was making me suspicious of an injured woman for no reason. "Can you walk if I help you?" I asked. "I think so." I got my arm under hers and lifted her up. She barely leaned on me. For someone with a broken leg, her weight was strange. Too balanced, too even. "There's a maintenance cabin," she said. "My sister and I passed it yesterday before we split up. It's closer than the trailhead. We should go there first, get warm, then hike out together at first light." I didn't like it, but it was already past 3. Daylight had maybe 3 hours left, and I didn't know this stretch of forest well enough to lead 2 lost women out in the dark on a trail I couldn't even find myself. "Okay," I said. "Which way?" She pointed, without a second of hesitation, into trees where there was no trail at all. We walked almost an hour. She never once slowed down. She never once favored the leg she said was broken. Twice I watched her step clean over a root without looking, the way you only do on ground you've walked 100 times. I started testing her without meaning to. I asked where her sister had parked. She said something vague about a lot near the highway, a name that didn't match any trailhead I knew in that range. I asked how long they'd been hiking this loop. Her answer didn't match the first one she'd given me 20 minutes earlier. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself people get facts confused when they're scared and hurt. But a third thing happened. Smaller than the other 2, and it was the one I couldn't explain away. We crossed a shallow creek, and without looking down, without even slowing her pace, Claire stepped from stone to stone in a perfect line. 4 stones, no wasted movement, no hesitation, no searching for footing. I slipped twice trying to follow the exact same path. A woman who had never walked this ground before does not cross water like that. A woman who built the crossing does. The trees opened into a small clearing. A single cabin stood at the center, walls dark and warped. A chimney with no smoke. No trail led to it. No sign, no marker, nothing I'd seen on any map of this wilderness. "This is it," Claire said. Her voice had changed. Lighter, almost pleased. I stopped walking. "You said your sister was already here." "She is," Claire said and smiled. "Inside." Something about that smile didn't match her words. It matched something else. Something patient, like she'd been waiting a long time for me to ask exactly that. I turned to walk away. Her hand closed around my wrist. The grip was hard, far stronger than any injured hiker's grip should be. "Don't," she said quietly. It's easier if you just go in on your own. I tore my arm free and she let go too easily, like she wanted me running toward the cabin instead of away from her. My legs carried me there before my mind caught up. Some instinct telling me a door I could shut was safer than open woods with her behind me. I was wrong. I shoved the cabin door open, stumbled inside, and spun around to slam it shut. She was already standing in the doorway. She must have followed right behind me, fast and silent on the soft dirt, while I crashed through the brush ahead of her. She stepped past me into the cabin, calm, unhurried, and pulled the door closed. A bolt slid into place. Her hand had been resting on it the whole time, like she'd done this before and knew exactly where it was without looking. My eyes adjusted to the dim light through a cracked window. One room, a cot against the wall, a table in the center. The walls were covered in paper, driver's licenses taped in rows, photographs, different faces, different names, the kind of photo that ends up on a missing person flyer. I counted without meaning to, 11. On the table sat a coil of worn rope and a hunting knife with a bone handle. Claire watched me take it all in. She didn't look worried that I'd seen it. She looked proud. "They all came the same way you did," she said. A voice in the woods, someone hurting. People can't help themselves. They hear it and they go running toward it every single time. It's the easiest trap there is. My throat closed. "Where's your sister?" "There's no sister," she said. "There's just me and woods I know better than anyone alive, and people like you who wander in thinking they're the ones doing the rescuing." She picked the knife up off the table. Her calm never cracked once. "You'll be 12, she said, and stepped toward me. I grabbed the only thing in reach, an iron poker leaning against the cold fireplace, and swung it before she closed the gap. It caught her across the forearm. She screamed, more fury than pain, and the knife hit the floor between us. I didn't go for the knife. I went for the bolt. She recovered faster than I expected and caught the back of my jacket as I threw the door open. I twisted out of the sleeves and left it in her fist, the same way 11 other jackets had probably torn away from 11 other people. I ran through the door and straight for the tree line. No path, no plan, just away. I heard her boots hit the dirt behind me. She knew this ground, I didn't. Every root and low branch that caught my foot was a spot she'd walked 100 times, and I was seeing for the first time in the dark at a dead sprint. I ran downhill because downhill always leads to something. A road, a stream, anything but more forest. Her footsteps stayed behind me a long time. Closer, then further, then closer again. Like she was herding me the way you'd herd an animal that hadn't figured out which way was actually out. I hit a gravel service road just as the last light gave out. A truck's headlights caught me stumbling into the middle of the road, both arms up. The driver was a forestry worker on an evening patrol. He pulled me into the cab and radioed it in before I'd even shut the door. Rangers reached the clearing at first light. The cabin was still there, but it was empty. No cot, no table, no photographs on the walls, just bare wood and old nail holes where things had clearly been torn down and carried out fast. She'd been ready to abandon that place the moment anyone got out alive. If I hadn't torn my jacket getting free, they told me later, they might have written the whole thing off as an old hunting shack nobody had used in years. They found the sleeve near the tree line. That was all. 11 months later, hikers in a different wilderness 40 miles north reported hearing a woman screaming for help down a slope, using almost the exact words I heard that day. I don't answer voices in the woods anymore. Not a child's, not a woman's, not anyone's. Because somewhere out there, she is still waiting for someone to come running toward the sound of her voice. A voice fooled me, and then a device betrayed me. My name is Ryan Walsh. I'm a backcountry hunting guide from Jackson, Wyoming. I've spent 12 years leading solo trips into wilderness most people never see. Last November, I set out alone for a 5-day scouting trip into the Bridger-Teton wilderness. I carried 2 devices for safety. One was a small tracker on my belt that showed my exact location on a screen and let me send short messages home, even with no cell signal. The other lived in my pack, a backup unit that could send an emergency call for help from almost anywhere on Earth. I had never needed either one. I felt completely safe, but I was wrong. On the second day, a thick fog rolled in and swallowed the entire valley. I checked my tracker. The screen was glitching, spinning, unable to lock a location. I was lost, in fog so heavy I couldn't see my own boots. I didn't panic. I sent a message through my backup device to emergency services. Lost in the North Valley, zero visibility, staying put. It was already freezing. I pitched my tent fast, crawled into my sleeping bag, and waited for help to find me. I was lying on my back, staring up at the tent fabric when the wind stopped completely. The forest went dead silent, no branches moving, no animal sounds, nothing. Then lightning cracked overhead, and in that one flash of white light, I saw a shape pressed against the roof of my tent, directly above my face, a human face. Someone was standing over me, pressing their face into the fabric so hard it dipped downward, close enough that I could make out the shape of a forehead, a nose, a mouth, inches from my own skin with only a thin layer of nylon between us. Then two hands closed over the top of the tent and pressed down, hard, driving the fabric onto my chest and shoulders. My arms were trapped at my sides. I couldn't move, couldn't get a full breath in. A voice low and rough came through the nylon, so close I could feel the warmth of it. "I'm here. What help do you need?" Every part of me went cold at once. I screamed and thrashed as hard as I could, and the weight lifted off me instantly like it had gotten exactly what it wanted. I heard footsteps sprint away into the trees, fast, heavy, unhurried by the dark. I grabbed my knife and both devices and bolted out into the freezing dark. The fog was still so thick I couldn't see 3 feet ahead. I ran blind through the trees, branches slashing my face, no direction, just away. Twice I stopped dead, certain I heard footsteps somewhere behind me matching my pace exactly, stopping the instant I stopped. Both times there was only silence and my own breathing. A minute later my tracker buzzed in my hand. A message appeared. The sender was listed as search and rescue. "We see your location. Fog is too thick for a helicopter. Follow the marked path on your screen to a safety shelter." Relief hit me like a wave. I thought the rescue team had found me through the tracker's signal, that somewhere out there a real person was watching a dot on a screen and guiding me home. I followed the line, running through dense brush, trusting the device completely because it had never once failed me before. Not on any trip, not in 12 years. That trust was the last mistake I made that night. After 20 minutes, the path led me into a narrow, rocky canyon with high walls closing in on both sides. The trail markings on the screen kept pointing forward, deeper past a bend where the canyon narrowed even further. I stopped to catch my breath. Something about the silence in there felt wrong, too complete. The kind of quiet a place has when nothing living wants to be in it. I looked up at the ridge above me. Lightning lit the canyon again, and I saw him. Standing on the cliff edge, looking straight down at me, was a man, not a ranger. His clothes were filthy and layered, stiff with dirt and old sweat. His face was gaunt, hollowed out by years of exposure, deep lines cut into sun-damaged skin. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, fixed on me without blinking. His mouth stretched into a grin, yellow teeth showing the look of someone watching an animal that had just walked into a trap it couldn't see. My stomach dropped, my legs locked. My tracker buzzed again. The screen went blank. Then a new message appeared. "You follow directions very well." Then the screen died completely. He had gotten into the device somehow. He wasn't rescue. He had been using the exact same technology meant to save me to walk me straight into this canyon. I grabbed my backup device with shaking hands, trying to send an emergency call before he reached me. Instead of sending, it received something. A video file landed on the screen, already loading. I hit play. The video showed this same canyon, the same rock walls, filmed from somewhere close to where I was standing right now. A young hiker was chained to a metal post driven into the ground, his clothes torn, his face streaked with dirt and tears, begging into the camera. His voice was small and broken, repeating the same word over and over, "Please." The grinning man from the cliff stepped into frame behind him, unhurried, and rested a hand on the hiker's shoulder like they were old friends. The hiker's scream cut through the recording, raw and short, and the video cut to black before I understood what had happened. Under it, one final message loaded onto the screen. "Do you want to see what happened to him next? Look behind you." Ice ran through my entire body. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I turned around slowly, already knowing what I would find. He was standing right there. He had come down off the ridge without a sound, inches from my face. I could smell him, dirt and sweat and something rotten underneath it. His breath was hot on my skin, his grin hadn't moved. I screamed and swung my pack into his face as hard as I could. He staggered back, cursing, and I ran, not thinking, not planning, just moving. I could hear him behind me almost immediately, boots slamming the rock, gaining ground fast, his breathing loud, and even like this cost him no effort at all. He knew every turn in that canyon. I didn't. I hit a dead end, a solid wall of stone rising higher than I could climb, and spun around. He was closing in, walking now instead of running, laughing low and steady, certain he already had me. Then I saw it. A narrow crack splitting the canyon wall, barely wider than my shoulders. I threw myself into it without thinking twice, scraping my arms and back raw against the rock on both sides, fighting for every inch until I broke through to the other side and hit open ground. He slammed against the gap behind me, too broad to follow, screaming in rage, his fist punching through the opening and grabbing at nothing but air. I didn't stop moving. I ran for hours in the dark until I finally broke onto a paved road and flagged down a passing truck. I collapsed on the shoulder of the highway, unable to speak. Police searched the canyon the next day. They found a hidden shelter carved into the rock, barely visible from the trail above it. Inside were the belongings of 6 hikers who had vanished over the previous 4 years. Wallets, rings, journals with handwriting that stopped mid-sentence. Chains bolted into the stone floor, worn smooth in places from years of use. They recovered the remains of 3 of them in shallow graves nearby, and identified 2 more from items alone. Their bodies never found. He was never caught. Investigators believe he had been living in that wilderness for years, moving between shelters, using stolen equipment to break into tracking devices and lead solo hikers exactly where he wanted them, one at a time, patient enough to wait months between each one. I don't camp alone anymore. I sold the tracker and the backup device the week I got home, but it didn't matter. I flinch every time my phone buzzes with a message I wasn't expecting. My whole body going cold before I even look at the screen, because some part of me is still standing in that canyon, waiting for a video to load, showing me exactly what happens next. That device betrayed me, but the worst was when I realized the badge was fake. My name is Marcus Doyle. I'm a warehouse supervisor from Spokane, Washington. I've been camping on weekend trips for about 4 years. Nothing too remote, nothing too advanced. Last spring, I drove into the Kaniksu National Forest for a 3-day solo trip on trails I hadn't hiked before. I'd pitched my tent that morning near the trailhead and left it staked down while I went out for a day loop. By late afternoon, a heavy fog dropped over the ridge and swallowed the trail markers whole. I checked my map, turned in a slow circle, and realized I had no idea which direction I'd come from. My phone had no signal. The light was already starting to fail. I called out a few times, my own voice sounding strange and small, swallowed by the fog before it could travel more than a few feet. Nothing answered except the wind moving through branches I couldn't see. Then through the gray, a flashlight beam cut across the trees. A man stepped out of the fog, green jacket, silver badge on his chest. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. "Thank God," I said. He looked at me, and something about his face made the relief drain right back out. His eyes were wide, fixed on me without blinking, and they didn't match the calm, professional voice that came out of his mouth a second later. There was something underneath the surface of his expression, something eager, that a person helping a lost stranger shouldn't have. "You're off the path, Marcus," he said. "You belong to the park now." I froze. "How do you know my name?" He was looking down at the luggage tag clipped to my backpack strap. He'd read it off the bag, that was all. I told myself that was all. Before I could say another word, his hand closed around my upper arm, hard, like a clamp. "Follow me," he said, and pulled me off the trail into the thick brush without waiting for an answer. He moved fast, too fast to be leading a lost, tired stranger back to safety. Branches tore at my jacket. Mud sucked at my boots. I stumbled twice, and both times he yanked me back up without slowing down, his grip tightening each time until I could feel it bruising under my sleeve. I tried to memorize the direction we were heading, some landmark, anything. but the fog erased every tree behind us the second we passed it, like the forest was closing back up over our trail on purpose. I looked at the radio clipped to his belt. It wasn't broadcasting normal chatter. It was playing something low and looped, a scratchy recording of static with a faint sound buried underneath it that took me a second to place. Screaming, distant but there, cycling over and over. My mouth went dry. "Where are we going?" "Shortcut," he said, not looking back. "To the station. Keep moving." I thought about pulling away and running, but I had no idea which direction led anywhere, and he clearly did. Being dragged towards something felt marginally better than being lost and alone in the dark, so I let him pull me forward, hating myself for it with every step. We came out into a hidden ravine. A small cabin sat in the center of it, wood gray and warped, windows dark, like it had been standing there for 100 years without anyone noticing. He shoved the door open and pushed me inside. The door slammed shut behind us. A bolt scraped into place. He pocketed the key. The air inside was cold and smelled like old smoke and something underneath it I didn't want to name. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light coming through one small window. The walls weren't covered in maps or supply lists. They were covered in missing person flyers. Dozens of them, faces and names, red X marks scratched over every single one. Some of the paper yellowed and curling at the edges like they'd been up there for years. On a table in the center of the room sat a coil of heavy chain and a hunting knife, its blade worn from use, not new. I backed against the wall. "What is this? Let me out." His helpful voice was gone. His face had gone flat, hollow, like whatever expression he'd been performing for me on the trail had simply switched off. He picked up the knife and walked toward me unhurried. "The park's full," he said quietly. "Too many people wandering where they don't belong." I cleaned it up. Nobody looks twice for a lost hiker when a ranger already searched and came back with nothing. He tilted his head toward the wall. "Your statistic 14. 14 red X marks. 14 people before me." He lunged. I threw myself sideways and the knife buried itself in the wood inches from where my head had been. He was stuck for half a second, wrenching the blade free, and in that half second I grabbed a heavy iron lantern off the table and swung it into the side of his face with everything I had. Bone cracked. A wet sound I still hear sometimes when I close my eyes. He roared and staggered back, blood pouring from his nose, but he didn't go down. I didn't wait to see if he would. I dove past him, ripped the key out of his jacket pocket with shaking hands, threw the bolt and ran into the fog. I ran without knowing where I was going. Branches cut my face. My boots kept catching on roots I couldn't see. Behind me, a spotlight snapped on, sweeping through the trees, and his voice boomed out through a megaphone, distorted and furious. "There's nowhere to hide in my park, Marcus. I know every tree here." I kept running until my lungs burned and the fog thinned ahead of me and I saw firelight. I broke into a public campground screaming and collapsed in front of a family gathered around their fire. "Someone's chasing me. Please help me." The father grabbed a heavy flashlight and a hatchet from beside his woodpile and ran toward the tree line, shouting for whoever was out there to show himself. 2 other campers followed with their own lights, and within seconds the fog behind me was lit up by 3 separate beams, sweeping, searching, voices calling out into the dark. He came out of the fog anyway. I don't think he expected 3 grown men waiting for him instead of one exhausted, unarmed hiker. He was still holding the knife. Blood dried down his face from where I'd caught him with the lantern, and for a second he just stood there at the tree line, calculating like he was working out whether the numbers had changed enough to matter. They had. The father swung the hatchet flat-side first, catching him across the shoulder and knocking him off his feet before he could raise the blade. The other 2 campers were on him in seconds, pinning him face down in the dirt while he screamed and thrashed underneath them, still trying to reach the knife he'd dropped in the fall. One of them ran for a radio in his truck at the campground entrance and called it in, giving our location while the other 2 kept him pinned in the mud, his screaming turning to a low, furious muttering that none of us could make out. State police reached us within the hour. They found the cabin at dawn along with the remains of the other 13 hikers, some buried behind it, some hidden inside the walls. They found the chains, the knife, and a box of luggage tags, each one labeled with a name, some of them so old the ink had faded almost to nothing. They also confirmed something else at the scene, something worse in its own way than anything in the cabin. Dental records matched the badge to a park ranger who had died in a hiking accident on that same mountain 20 years earlier. The man pinned in the mud in front of me had never been him. He had simply found the body, taken the uniform, and never stopped wearing it. Whoever he really was, he had been living under a dead man's identity for 2 decades, patient enough to wait years between victims, careful enough to leave nothing behind that could name him. Investigators are still working through records on 11 other incidents across 3 different national forests going back 19 years, trying to work out how many belong to him. He's in custody now, but he hasn't said a single word since the arrest. Not his real name, not how long he'd been doing this. Nothing. I don't go into the woods anymore. I don't trust a badge, and I don't trust a flashlight coming toward me in the fog. No matter how relieved I feel in that first second before I see the eyes behind it. Because even locked up, he still hasn't told anyone if 14 was the whole number. And there are families out there who may spend the rest of their lives never finding out. If these accounts kept you awake, subscribe. The shadows are still growing. Do you have a survival story that changed you? Drop it in the comments. This is Living with Shadows.